Welcome to stormTRacker, your eye on the storm of your Carolina Hurricanes, and your home for the best insight and analysis to keep you totally informed on what's happening with the Canes. Whether it's the latest news on the ice or off the ice, we've got you covered. Now let's begin. Here's your host, Tom Ray.
Some of the top contenders for the Stanley Cup in the NHL this year have already made moves here as we head towards the trade deadline. Big announcements last week with Vancouver acquiring Elias Lindholm from Calgary, and then Winnipeg following suit shortly after acquiring Sean Monahan from the Montreal Canadiens. Both of these guys were highly sought free agents that folks were looking for to kind of complete their rosters as they head towards the playoffs in a Stanley Cup run. But you might be wondering, what about some of these other teams? I want to talk a little bit about the Carolina Hurricanes today. The Canes, of course, have been on a run, 12-2-1, and so they're playing extremely well. And you have to expect they've probably got a couple of moves in mind. You know, this is an unusual year for them. They actually have some cap space as they head to the deadline. Courtesy of our friends at Cap Friendly, the Canes are going to have close to $9 million in AAV available, so that's going to be a good situation for them, and that should allow them to make the moves that they want to do to tweak the lineup. I don't see any major moves here. They have not historically done that. You know, if you look back at the last number of years, it's been kind of a tweak here and a tweak there. Last year, Shane Gostisbehere was picked up from Arizona. It was a good move. I thought he played well for the Canes. I would have been pleased if they re-signed him, but he moved on to Detroit, and he's having a great season for the Wings. The year before that was Max Domi. That was an interesting one. It was a last-second deal, literally. Apparently, it was just down to the final minutes and a very complex deal. The Canes really had no cap space and had to use some help to get that deal done. And the year before, Yanni Hakanpää, who I thought came in and did a nice job for the Canes and then moved on to Dallas. He was also acquired from the Ducks at the end of the deadline. So the Canes have not made major moves historically. There was one outlier. That was in 2020. The Canes picked up Brady Shea and Vinny Trocheck in separate deals. They were both major deals for the Canes and paid off in spades for them. But that's a rarity and I think very much an outlier. And I think this year the Canes will go with their usual plan, which is to make a few tweaks. We take a look at what the assets are for the Hurricanes. They do have draft picks, of course. The Canes have a full complement pretty well over the next few seasons of draft picks. In fact, they have 2 second-rounders this year, and one of them courtesy of the deal they did with the Flyers for Tony DeAngelo. So that puts them in a good situation there. I don't see them moving a first-round pick. I don't think it'll be necessary, and they'll be trying to find a way to do later picks and possibly prospects. And talking about prospects, here's some of the guys that may be available. I think Ryan Suzuki might be at the top of the list. There might be teams thinking that Suzuki, who was a good first-round pick for the Canes and very significant promise when he was drafted, he just hasn't panned out for the Canes. And I don't see a spot for him because, of course, Vasily Ponomarov is next in line at center for the Canes. So I think Suzuki is definitely available. Dylan Coghlan will be available, I expect, as well. The Canes are going to be looking for some more defensive acumen in any blue liner that they have available. So I think he's going to be available for a team looking for some more offense. He's had a great season in the American League. In fact, was in the All-Star game recently. So Coghlan could be available. And a couple of guys in Europe sent back because the Canes did not have an AHL affiliate this year. That would be Anthony Honka and Noel Gunler, both of those guys back in Finland. I think they're possible moves as well. They don't really have, in my mind, a future with the Hurricanes. So lots of opportunity for the Canes in terms of prospects, draft picks. They could do whatever they need to do to get it done. So looking at that, looking at their cap space, what kind of moves can we expect then from the Hurricanes? Well, first of all, let's take a look at the defensive side. So the Canes are going to shore up their blue, and I think they're probably going to want to do something with a veteran that can add some strong defensive acumen and really can be a guy that can play some minutes if they need him to. A great place to start might be the San Jose Sharks. Of course, the Canes had done a nice deal a few years ago with the Sharks. Mike Greer and Don Waddell getting together on the deal that sent Brent Burns over to the Canes. So maybe they'll be trading partners again. And here's a couple of guys that I think might be of interest to the Canes. Mario Ferraro, of course, is of interest to a lot of teams. Ferraro's been averaging 22.5 plus minutes per night, and he's definitely been a solid player this year for the Sharks. He's their go-to guy in a lot of situations. 47 games, 14 points. Again, $3.25 million deal, so that's very palatable. And it might be interesting for the Canes because if they think they may lose a defenseman in free agency this year, Ferraro would be available at a very modest cost. So that's a pretty good win on their part, as well as having him for the playoff run this year. Another defenseman who might be of interest, who's had some action in the playoffs, of course, is Jan Ruda. Ruda played with the Tampa Bay Lightning when they did some of their Stanley Cup work a few years ago. Ruda checks in at 6'3", 200 pounds. He's a $2.75 million deal. He's got one more year left. So again, could be insurance if the Canes lose a D in the offseason. He's a guy that brings solid play back there. He's got 12 points this year, so he brings a bit of offense. And he's been strong defensively as well. He's just minus 11, which doesn't sound that great, but on the Sharks, that's a pretty good number. So Ruda and Ferraro could be of interest to the Hurricanes if they want to go past this year and have some more insurance going forward. A couple of other guys who do have UFA deals this year. Ilya Lyubushkin with the Anaheim Ducks, of interest to a lot of folks. He checks in at 6'2", 200. He's a solid defensive defenseman. He plays well in his own zone. He's got a good first pass. I think he's a guy that could help a lot. He's been averaging about 17 minutes a game. 2.75 mil, again, very reasonable deal for the Canes. So he's a guy they're going to want to look at. Another guy not quite so expensive with the Hawks is Jared Tenorti. Tenorti checks in at 6'6" and 230. Again, Tenorti's a bit of a journeyman, but he's a guy that could help in a situation. Plays big minutes, 16 minutes plus with the Chicago Blackhawks. And again, at that low $1.25 million deal, he could be of interest to the Canes. Now, looking up front, the Canes again are going to be looking to add some pieces. I don't think they're expecting anything major here. They want some depth, and a guy that could help, again, a Shark involved in this could be Luke Kunin. Kunin was 15th overall in 2016 with the Minnesota Wild. He had a lot of promise with them. Looked pretty good his first couple of seasons, but has not been quite so strong recently. This year, just 6 goals so far, so the offense is slow in coming. But he's a good, solid defensive player. He can play center in the wing. Very flexible up front. He can play on any line. So I think he's a guy that could be of interest to the Hurricanes. Checks in at 6 foot, 200 pounds. So again, brings a little bit of size. Another guy that could help up front is veteran Sam Carrick over in Anaheim. Carrick, a little bit more of an edge to his game. He likes to get in and shake things up. We've seen that in a number of games with the Canes. Carrick checks in at 6 feet, 200 pounds. So again, a solid player up front. Can play center in the wing. Pretty good in the face-off dot. Good, solid defensive center. So I think he could be of interest. Again, comes in at a very modest $850K deal. Interesting to look at guys like Carrick and possibly Kunin. Now, if the Canes decide they want to go big up front and there is a player that's available that they might look at, you've got Tarasenko with the Senators. You might have Patrick Kane with Detroit, depending on what happens with the Wings. Another guy with the Sharks that might be of interest is Mikael Granlund. He's having an excellent season with the Sharks. So lots of players that might be available. And to wrap it up, I thought we'd take a look at goaltending. Of course, it's going to revolve around what happens with Freddie Andersen. Andersen went out with a blood clot issue a couple of months ago, but recently was cleared to get back on ice. This is big news for the Canes. Freddie was outstanding in the playoffs last year, and if Freddie can return right now, that'd be like getting a goaltender at the deadline. So this is exciting news for the Canes. And depending on Freddie's health, we'll see what happens from there. Of course, the Canes do have 3 goaltenders in camp right now. That would be Pyotr Kochetkov, who just came back from his concussion injury. He was playing great hockey when he went down previously. Antti Raanta, who's been carrying the bulk of the load recently, has been playing very, very well. Raanta started the season slow, but he's been on a roll lately. Raanta, again, is the veteran that through the last couple of years has made a big difference for the Hurricanes as well. And then they've got Spencer Martin. He was picked up on waivers from Columbus, played great in his first game, beating the Bruins. So we'll have to see what Spencer can do as well. So the Canes very deep in goal. If Freddie returns, I think they're pretty well set. Now, if Freddie does not return, the Canes may choose to pick somebody up. A couple of guys they might want to look at are Kaapo Kähkönen with the Sharks, and former Kane, James Reimer. Now, Kokkonen is a goaltender of interest to a lot of teams. He's having a great season with the Sharks. He's got a .901 save percent now, but in the last 10 games has been .906, and that's on a defensively challenged Sharks team, so pretty good numbers. And he's got a friendly $2.75 million deal. He's a UFA at the end of the year, so they've got options there. The other guy is Reimer, a former Hurricane. Reimer played well with the Canes, and he's a guy not seeing much action with Detroit these days. Alex Lyon has claimed that number 1 spot, and I don't think there's much room for Reimer. Again, team-friendly $1.5 million deal. He's not having a great season, but he's a guy that once he gets into tough games can really make a difference. So both of these guys are available. We'll see if there's a possible deal there, but I think it all comes down to what happens with Freddie. Lots of things are going to happen over this next month or so. We're going to see a lot of deals, and we're going to see the Canes involved in a lot of discussions for sure. Don Waddell is going to be a busy guy, and we'll see how that all plays out. The Canes are definitely in the mix for the Cup this year, and a couple of good moves at the deadline could make the difference. We're going to be watching it closely and keep you totally up to date right here on stormTRacker.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends for everything with the Canes. You need stormTRacker.